released a new edition in 2018. She's also the founder of the muslimasrenaissance.org and Women of Ilm. Alima is currently pursuing an Alamaya with Aqwa and Al Salam Institute. We'll start the talk after a Qur'an recitation, and hope you all enjoy.
You have a YouTube video.
Right. ما ودعنا الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث.
So bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa sahbihi wa sallam wa man wala. I understand that we have some individuals who are not Muslim, right? Okay, awesome. So I'm going to translate for you guys. So I started in the name of Allah, and I sent peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I also want to start off with Assalamu alaikum. And whenever we hear Assalamu alaikum, especially when we start our lectures or when we meet someone, why do we say Assalamu alaikum? For us and for us Muslims, God is reframing that when you meet somebody, especially when you meet a Muslim or especially when you meet a friend, you are, you're starting on a new footing. You're seeing them from a different light. So I've been asked to speak about the topic of women in Islam, women who made an impact. But before I begin, I want to ask you guys why you're here today. What made you come today? So I want to hear some from the brothers, some from the sisters, and especially those who may not be Muslim. So any from the sisters, what made you come today? We'll just wait until, yes, brother.
People don't tend to know the background and input that women and just contribution that they've done, they ignore. And some people are very ignorant about these situations and need to raise awareness. That's one reason why I came today as well.
Brilliant. What's your name, sorry?
Ayub.
Okay, Ayub. Thank you so much. So anyone from the sister side, what made you come today, other than your friend forcing you, which sometimes happens? Anyone from the sisters? So Jahan, other than the fact that you have to come, so what's one reason that motivated you to come today?
Honestly, because I would like to gain more knowledge on the inspirational women that existed in the history of Islam, so that I can pass it on and show them to.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else? Your engagement will help me adapt my talk to your needs. So, anybody? Yes.
Regarding the political scenario nowadays, a lot of rights about women, so it would be nice to see gain more knowledge about the Islamic point of view.
Okay, awesome. And be honest, by the way. If you have a problematic view about Islam, unless you don't speak about it, how can we address it? So, anyone from the brothers? Because just one thing, by the way, I came to Surrey last year, and we had one brother come. So, when Brother Muhammad invited me, and I'm like, mashallah, the whole vibe was different. I'm like, how many brothers will come this time? So, mashallah, it's really nice to see. So, who put their hand up? Yes.
I've generally only not heard about, but know about the male role models in Islam. So, maybe there's something else you can learn from the female role models as well.
Okay, awesome. So anybody else before I continue? Okay, so one thing I want to do is I'm going to bring up some verses from the Qur'an. And one of the reasons why I'm going to bring up verses from the Qur'an is because when people want change and when people see oppression that may appear like it's from the Muslim community, they try and, you know, from the political aspect, they see it from, they turn to isms, they turn to ideologies. And what we found is that Muslims, they feel very strongly about their faith, even if they differ in practice. And what my aim is to go back to the Qur'an and demonstrate how did the Prophet and how did God truly empower women. And you know, when I think about revolutionary women, I'm going to bring up examples of women who were mentioned in the Qur'an. Then I'm going to bring up examples of women in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Then I'm going to mention women in Islamic history. And finally, I'm going to mention contemporary role models. I always say to people, whether you're Muslim or whether you're non-Muslim, leave your biases at the door. Like, if you come in this lecture with your cup full, I can't benefit you. I can't, like, you can't benefit from this lecture. But if you're even willing to empty that cup a little, then I can help bridge, you know, create bridges. And that's why I say, and you know, you were talking about the political state, you know, subhanAllah, even now, we know what's happening in the media right now. I go on Facebook and I have Muslims, you know, literally, they say, now I understand why my father and mother said, let's leave a plot of land in Bangladesh or Pakistan. Like, we don't feel that welcome. I'm like, calm down. Like, nobody's throwing you out. This is an opportunity for you to understand how much am I part of this society. Because if you're born here, you are Western British Muslims. And you're here to stay. So how can I make an impact in my community? And the topic of women in Islam is a sore point for a lot of people. Because a lot of it is based on untruth. It's just not, a majority of stuff that's said is not true. And that's why I was speaking to one of the sisters and I said, you know, you're at university, you're critical thinkers. When you write an academic essay, your professor expects you to go outside and look at different sources. If you search Muslim women on Google, has anybody done that? You search Muslim women, oh my God, it's like horrific images. And I look at those images and I'm like, no wonder people think Islam is oppressive. If I was looking from the outside, and I remember one person, they said that if you want to make something ineffective, just bury it on the second page of Google, because nobody looks there. And that's what we have right now. So we have to redefine what it means to be a Muslim woman. So I'm starting off, I'm mentioning Qur'an, once again mentioning that, you know, God, for Muslims, He revealed the Qur'an in Arabic for many reasons. And one of those major reasons is because Arabic in its purest sense is absolutely beautiful. For example, the concept of sadness in the Qur'an. There's different names. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, God, He uses wail. Does anybody feel like when they're going through a problem, they just feel like cursed, nothing's going right, and they're thinking to themselves, when will it get better? Like, that's wail. There's something called ghamam. It's like, you know, in movies, someone's really sad, what do they have over them? They have a cloud, right? And like the sun can't penetrate. Ghamam is the perfect word for that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمُ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. I want to take you through a journey, 4 steps. And for those of you who may be wondering, why Quran? If you think Islam is oppressive, and especially if someone comes to you and say Islam is oppressive, and they start to quote verses from that are out of context, you're like, this is the Quran, and this is our springboard. So here, God from the beginning, and I need to lay this foundation, is He says that men and women are from the same element. You're created from the same thing. So you know, like abuse or oppression that people try and say is in the name of Islam, the Quran from the beginning says, no, you're made from the same thing. Then there's another verse. Then it's, so first, number 1, God says you're created from the same element. Secondly, He says, فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُمْ رَبُّهُمْ أَنِّي لَا أُضِيعُ عَمَلًا عَامِلٍ مِّنكُمْ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى. From an English language perspective, you have male, you have female, you have man and you have woman, you have God and you have goddess. A female is always linked to the male, right? From an Arabic perspective, That's not the case. The woman is imra'atun or an-nisa. The woman is untha and the man is dhakarin. He's rijal, he's rajulun. The men and women have a complete separate identity. That's why in marriage for Muslims, the woman does not take the name of the husband, because she still maintains that individual identity. So number one was that men and women are from the same element. Secondly, even though they're from the same element, they are two completely separate identities. I'm going back to the fundamentals. So number three is, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, and I've got the translation, so I'm not repeating it. So وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. So God, He says, men and women are allies. Once again, going back to the Arabic language, allies means friends, it means protectors, it means men and women, they look out for each other, they're there for each other. The final point, and I'm going to end on this note here, men and women are garments. So this is another verse. He says, هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ. He says, they are a clothing for you and you are a clothing for them. Some people are like, what does that mean? It means that, you know, your clothing, your clothes, your womb, it protects you, it looks out for you. So here, for Muslims, even before we start speaking about like the status that women have held in society, and they still hold now, by the way, like all these women are at university, like you're studying and you're educating. Like if Islam was so oppressive, would you be here? Sometimes the reality speaks louder than the media, but the media like deafens us. And I just think to myself, I'm like, don't you see all those Muslim women participating in society and you still will go and watch a video that's biased? So here, 4 elements, the 4 steps. So this is what God has done. They are one from the same element. 2, they are individual identities. 3, that they are protecting friends. And 4, they are like libas, they're close by. And this is the context of marriage. It's in the context of marriage, because marriage, what God says, it's mawadda and it's rahmah. It's love and it's mercy. And who here is married? Put your hand up. Okay, so I'm married and I have 2 kids. I have a 2 and a 3-year-old. They're with my mom right now. And everybody will understand that within the marital relationship, there'll be times when there's love. And there'll be times when you're like, ugh. And that's when the mercy and the rahmah comes in, where you're good to her, even though you don't love her, or you're not feeling that love for her, or you're not feeling that love for him. So it's that clause. So I'm going to end on that point there. So those are my 4 points. So one thing I want to begin is that when it comes to revolutionary women, what is the word and what does the term revolutionary mean to you? What does that mean to you? But even before we begin that, what are some of the misconceptions that you have heard about Muslim women? And for those of you who are not Muslim, what are some of the misconceptions that you have about Muslim women? So can we have some engagement? So what are the misconceptions? Yes.
Misconceptions?
Yes.
Okay.
So your name first?
My name is Julian.
Julian, okay, awesome.
Okay. That there are no strong women in Islam. Of course there are, unhappy past elements that would be a misconception. Not all Muslim women feel themselves to be oppressed, clearly. I would say that in general Muslim women have been oppressed, okay, and that's still the case probably today in Muslim majority countries. But it's not a universal truth, okay?
Yeah, thank you. And one thing I want to say, how would we define oppression?
Yeah, I would say that women are not so free, or not so free as men are to do as they wish. Okay.
Is that presumption?
Sorry?
Or is that your presumption? Or
I was just trying to give you a definition of oppression. Okay.
No, that's good. That's good. I'm just trying to look into it a bit deeper, so we can widen the conversation. But you're right. And this is something, when I first started giving lectures, especially about women in Islam, we'd come with the notion that, oh my God, women are great. Muslim women are great. And then somebody would get up and like, no, they're oppressed in this country. And then after a few years of lecturing, I came to the realization that we have to come up here and be clear that there are Muslim women who are oppressed. absolutely, you can't deny it. Even I would go in my communities, and that's why when we do the Muslim Mother Renaissance, and when I come here, one of the reasons I'm here is because I'm tackling that abuse. That I'm making it absolutely clear that women have a place in the mosques. There is no such thing as domestic violence in Islam. That women should go forward in their careers, women should go and progress, and that takes nothing away from their modesty and spirituality. Yes, I would also say that when it comes to Muslim countries, for example, if we mention names, like Pakistan, I'm Pakistani, so I can mention that. So, you know, I'm part of a group called Soul Sisters Pakistan. It's a big group on Facebook, and you'll be surprised, and like somebody started a thread, how many women drive in Pakistan? And I'm thinking, oh, there's not going to be many. And literally, it's like there's like 1,000 women commenting, like, we own our car, I own my own car, I drive, I'm working. And even that changed my misconception about Pakistan. Because I had this presumption that women in Pakistan are oppressed, because when I watched the news, so even that challenged my ideas. So like I said, challenging ideas. So any more ideas, misconceptions about women?
It's not a misconception, but adding to that point, I think sometimes with regards to countries like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, South Asian countries especially, culture is more prominent there than religion. And people confuse the culture with religion. It's not religion, it's culture that's taken over. Like domestic violence stuff, that's not religion, as you said. And again, misconceptions about driving and anything, there's nothing like that in Islam. And coming from Pakistan, I was born in Karachi. All my life I've seen women who never, in my social circle, never even like heard of it. When I came here and watched the news, I heard of oppression in Pakistan, and obviously it's increasing because of radicalization or whatever that's going on in the world. But even living there, I'd never heard of oppression, or like women can't drive, or women have to look a certain way, or things like that. I'd never heard of it, but coming here and watching the news, it really does add to those misconceptions.
Absolutely. I was in Trinidad and went for a convention, and the sister, and I'm like, oh, why don't you come to the UK? She's like, no, I'm gonna have acid thrown at me. I'm like, you're not. And I'm like, wait. She's like, I've been watching the news, and like women in London are having acid thrown on them, and she was like literally scared. I'm like, that's not true. And I remember I went to the US on an exchange program with the US Embassy recently, about 5 years ago. And literally stepping into the shoes, you realize that we make presumptions. We make presumptions, and we have to go back to research. And more importantly, we have to go back to having real, genuine conversations with people. Like nothing tackles Islamophobia, nothing tackles xenophobia other than real conversations. So, moving on. So, what I want to focus on today is the muhaddithat. So, before the muhaddithat and women from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So, what makes a woman revolutionary? What I said is what makes, and because, you know, these women in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, they were absolutely ordinary women who became extraordinary due to their commitment, due to their responses. So I'm going to focus on about four women. Okay, so who has heard about Nusayba bint Ka'b, radiallahu anha? So may Allah be pleased with her. Put your hand up. Okay. So Nusayba, her name was Ammara. I recited the verse, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ, the men and women are believing allies. They say that that verse was revealed because Ammara, she came to the Prophet ﷺ, she came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and she's like, you know, why are there not verses about women? Now there were, but this woman comes forward to a religious authority who for us Muslims is the highest religious authority, and she's like, what about me? Like, what about, why am I not included? And then they say that God heard her and he revealed that verse, that you are important, that you are imperative. So Islam for Muslims, it's absolutely spiritual. It's a connection back to Allah. It's a connection back to their Creator. Islam for Muslims answers that question first and foremost. Why am I here? Where am I headed? When I go into my grave, is this life the end? And this all stems from it. So they say Nusayba, you know, the Prophet, peace be upon him, it was a time they were being attacked. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, you know, they were defending themselves. So we know that in Mecca, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he was given the order that you are patient. That even though you are abused and you are mocked and you are slandered, you do not retaliate and you focus your efforts on reflection. You focus your efforts on your own and you strengthen your mind. Then in Medina, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he was given that permission that if you need to defend yourself, you can. So it's the Battle of Uhud. And here the Prophet, peace be upon him, he's being attacked. And here you have a woman and she's nursing the soldiers. So now you have these women, they're in the battlefield. I want you to understand, when I mention battlefield, people become a bit defensive. And I've been to America and I went to a basketball match, and when it came time for the anthem, they're like, put your hand up there, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm from the UK. We're not, like, we just about say God save the Queen or something. We don't do that kind of stuff. And we went to the Citadel. Anybody heard of the Citadel? Okay, so we went there and they were actually speaking, and she said that, you know, when it comes to female soldiers, it was a big thing to have a female soldier in class. And that female soldier actually got a lot of slack for even being there. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking of Nusayba, all these women, they're nursing the male soldiers, and suddenly she sees the Prophet, peace be upon him, being attacked, and she doesn't think twice, and she goes and she defends him and she protects him, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, he's like in shock, and he's thinking, he doesn't stop her, he doesn't say to her, you're a Muslim woman, you should stay at home. You're a Muslim woman, what are you doing in the private sphere? No, and that's why we have Umar. And for those of you who may not have heard of Umar, Umar is a really strong, principled personality. I'm trying to think of someone in the public sphere who's like that. And nobody comes to mind, actually. I was thinking of Boris Johnson, I'm like, no, the opposite, not happening. But he was really principled, and even Umar, who within Islamic history is known as a principled, firm character, he would take counsel from a shifa. And they say, and this is why Islamic literature is so strong, because it's been preserved so greatly. They say when they analyzed his counsel and his advice, and they analyzed her advice, they were pretty much the same, because they were constantly going back and forth. Like, that was absolutely normal. The society of the Prophet, and that's why the mosque of the Prophet, a lot of people are surprised that at the mosque of the Prophet, there was the men in front, there was women behind, and there was no barrier. They would see each other. There was a door, a separate door for the women, if they choose to go through there. But then there was a normal door that the men and women were just going out, because some women felt more comfortable because they were getting squashed. You know that is how that is, right? You're getting there, you're getting pushed around, you're like, oh, forget that. I just want my own separate door. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, he took their feelings into consideration and he got them a door. And I'm telling you personal stories, because when we look at Islam and when we look at the text, what we do is that what we do with the sources and what we do with the Prophet, peace be upon him, we rip him away from being an emotional human being. We dehumanize the Prophet, peace be upon him. We dehumanize Muslim women. And that's why the case of Shamima is going on right now. And I'm not a political analyst, so I'm not going to comment on it too much. But I remember a lot of women were commenting, and they're like, we feel like it's an attack on Muslim women. Because we know Shamima, like what she done, that's completely un-Islamic and unacceptable, and that's already agreeable. But this obsession with her in the media right now, we're capitalizing on it. Why? Like, we have to think about, because it makes money, because it takes us away from our priorities, which are Brexit right now, which actually do affect the future of our country. You know, like here, the Prophet, peace be upon him, that's why they say that when his son passed away, he had a young son. When his son passed away, he was crying. He was literally just crying his eyes out, as fathers do, right? And someone came up to him and was like, you're the Prophet of God, why are you crying? And the Prophet, peace be upon him, he like replied back to him like a human being. He's like, what can I do if God has deprived you of mercy? Like, just like, it's because he's human, he feels, he hurts. And that's why the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said one of the hardest times of my life was when I had stones thrown at me when I went to Taif. You know, he went to ask for help. He didn't even call them to Islam. He just asked for support. And they say that they got the young children and they got the, you know, people who just weren't that, you know, had mental health issues, and they got them to stone him to such an extent that he was bleeding. And they say he went out and he cried and he made a prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like, oh my God, like this is so hard. Calling people to what I believe is the truth is hard. What I'm saying is that we have to humanize the Prophet, peace be upon him. We have to humanize these women. That's when we can truly benefit from them. So you have Nusayba. So Nusayba wasn't, she wasn't wary of, you know, fighting, defending, being present. She was there, she was present. Then you have Aisha bin Abi Bakr. Who's head of Aisha? So Aisha is a really, they say that if Aisha was taken out of the picture, that half of Islam would be missing, because she is one of the major narrators of prophetic traditions, because she spent most of the time with the Prophet, peace be upon him. She was there with him at most of the time. So they say that Aisha demonstrated a high level of leadership. You know, when you think of somebody winning like a Nobel Peace Prize for like literature or for scholarship, for Muslims that is Aisha. You know, she was intelligent, she was young, she was courageous, she was resilient, she had a great memory, and that's why even at one time there was one companion, you know, if they uttered something that was for women, and Aisha radiallahu anha, may Allah be pleased with her, she'd get up and she would be the first to defend women. So these were women who had a voice, and they were speaking, and that's why Zainab bin Muhammad, the daughter of the Prophet, peace be upon him, they say that, you know, she was married to her husband. She was married to her husband, and then, you know, she accepted Islam and he didn't. So when they moved to Medina, they separated. And they say that when he was coming back from, he went to a trade caravan, and when he was returning, that, you know, he was attacked and he ran into Medina and he went and he sought help from his, she was still his wife, from his wife. And they say they went to her house, and Zainab, the daughter of the Prophet, she went out at the time of Fajr, because the women in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, they went to the prayers. They went for Fajr, they went for Dhuhr, they went for Isha, even when it's dark. It was very common. There was nobody could take the right of a woman from worship. So it's absurd why men and women do it today. So she went for Fajr, and she stood, they say she stood up, and in a really loud voice she said, I give protection to Abu al-As, the father of my daughter. And she shouts it. And this is a group, like she's surrounded by men, and she's surrounded by women, and she speaks really confidently. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, they say he turns around and he says, I wasn't aware of this. Like I didn't know she was going to do this. Then eventually the Prophet, peace be upon him, went to their house, and he said that that's absolutely fine, you can give protection. But I'm saying here was even the daughter of the Prophet, peace be upon him, she went out in the public forefront and she had a voice. And whenever I mention these examples, I find it absurd sometimes, because I'm like, these are so normal. Why do I have to give such normal examples that women, Muslim women, are doing anyway to prove a point about Islam? Do you understand where I'm coming from? But we are put on such a defense that Islam is oppressive, that Islam doesn't treat women well, that we feel the need to go back to the basics, unfortunately. So then you have Al-Khansa, and they say that Khansa was known for her poetry. She was an absolutely, like a genius when it came to words. And they say that Khansa, before she became Muslim, her brothers passed away, and she would write poetry. And they said that she's like, if it weren't for my, like for me fearing death, that I just would have like committed suicide or something. But they say that when she became Muslim, that her whole view of loss changed. When I had my son, Zakaria, he was born at 25 weeks, and he was born at a pound. And I remember my husband and I, we had to come to the realization there that my child wouldn't survive. And then there was a lot of nurses, and the nurses would come out to us, and they'd say, one thing we find profound about the Muslim community is how they deal with loss, because they believe that this life is not the end. They believe that their child, even if they lose at a younger age, is heading to somewhere greater. That maybe he or she has been protected from harm in this life. And she says, we find that profound, that even when someone passes away and the chaplains come in, the way Muslims deal with it, and that's what Hansa, number one, she was encouraged in the arts. She was incredibly skilled in writing, in performing, like, you know, you have spoken word, right? Like, she was incredible, and they say the Prophet, peace be upon him, whenever he would see her, he would say, hey Hannas, it's like, yeah Hannas, it's like more, like recite more poetry, I want to hear it, because the Arabs, they loved poetry. They like absolutely adore it. So here the Prophet, peace be upon him, he's a reflection of his culture, and it's like, he's encouraged her. So it's not like women just stay at home, you can't practice the arts. No, if you have a skill, the Prophet, peace be upon him, he nurtured it. And that's why we have Aisha, one of the greatest scholars, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, recognized that she has an absolutely excellent mind. So let's help her grow. So I'm going to mention now 2 women from the Qur'an. Who has heard of Queen of Sheba? Okay, so we have Bilqis. They call her Bilqis in the Qur'an, and you have Maryam, the mother of Jesus. And these 2 examples are absolutely profound, because the Qur'an, he mentions many male leaders in a very unfavorable light. He says they were evil, they were oppressive, they were tyrannical, they killed their people, they were greedy, they were power hungry, they put their own needs before their people. We see that now, right? Just look in the political arena. And then, surprisingly, God mentions Bilqis, a woman, and he mentions her in a favorable light. I've always found that profound. That here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, he's mentioning a woman, he's giving her leadership qualities, he's surrounding her with men who she is seeking guidance from, and they are seeking guidance from her. That within itself, the Quran is changing the paradigm. That you think women can't excel, you think the Quran is oppressive. You have Bilqis. Then you have Maryam alayhi salam. And Maryam, peace be upon him, what makes Maryam so great is that her mother Hannah had a misconception. The misconception of Hannah was that my daughter, like women can't excel. So she had a dream. She's like, I want a child. Like, you know, people like that. I want a child. I want him to become an imam. I want him to go out. I want him to have a leadership position. And she had this misconception that only men can do that. So she actually made a dua to Allah. She's like, oh Allah, she made a prayer that, you know, I want to dedicate this child for your sake. And they say that God, you know, here's a woman who truly believes. And they say that God could have given her a boy, but he gave her a girl. Because he was changing the perception that when it comes to your activism, when it comes to making a difference, your gender doesn't matter. And that's why Maryam, even at that time, she was the first woman to go in the houses of worship and have a place there. And I find that strange that women in our time are still fighting for places in the masjid. And here Maryam already achieves that because وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ, the men and women are allies. You know, and they say that her uncle, Zachariah, was the one that facilitated her. Because we're here to work together. Okay, so are you guys still awake?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah? I always have to ask that question. You guys are still awake? Okay, so I want to speak about the muhaddithat. So I want to focus on a few key areas. So the muhaddithat are female scholars who existed after the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. These female scholars, I want you to give me a number of how many women are recorded in Islamic texts. How many female scholars do you think we have?
You mean just in the Qur'an or in the Hadith?
In Islamic history.
Right,
Like,
in Islamic history.
in history. So after the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to now. But our research was from the classical scholars. Give me a number. Anybody? Sorry? 26. 26? 26. Like thousands of years. No, but we appreciate, mashallah, you know, like I'm putting you guys off from putting your hands up. Okay, I need another. Yes.
I'd say thousands.
1,000? Thousands? Okay, any more?
10,000.
You'd expect thousands.
Yeah, like 10,000, like the recorded in classical is 8,000. They came up with 8,000 names. 26. But on that one, how many women are directly, don't go. I'm going to feel bad. So how many women are mentioned in the Qur'an directly and indirectly?
One directly.
One directly? How many together, directly and indirectly?
Maybe the two that you mentioned.
Okay.
Don't count. We're going to be here for a long time. I tried this.
Just give me a random number. 20. Well, a calculated number, actually. 5 brothers.
26.
Okay, I'm going to bring you guys back 23. I think you got my question mixed up. Like you had the seerah and what was it? I was about to say something. Okay, so 23 women are mentioned in the Quran directly and indirectly, and thousands, 8,000, but there's absolutely so many more. They say that Imam al-Bukhari studied under 60 female teachers. It was very common for the male scholars to study under female scholars. It was just common. You'd go outside, the female should be holding a halaqah, and you'd sit inside. It wouldn't be a big thing. Like, for example, you brothers, you've come into this, let's just say, you've come into this Islamic lecture, and you're just going to leave. Not a big deal, right? Why do you make things into a big, it's not. You come, let's just say another female speaker came a few days later, you'd come and you'd attend and you'd leave. It was common. You have, and I'll mention numbers. Who here has heard of Ibn Hajar? Okay, so Imam al-Bukhari is, after the Quran, his book has the most prominence in the Ummah, the Muslim community. And he had like 60 female teachers. And then you have Ibn Hajar, they say he learned from his wife. You know what I mean? It was normal, like you're learning from it. It was very common. So a few answers. So the existence of the muhaddithat, the female scholars, it breaks the stereotypes that women cannot be or were not authorities within the Muslim community. That's why there was only one copy of the Quran, the Mus'haf, and after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, peace be upon him, who was the copy given to? Hafsa. It was given to Hafsa. It wasn't given to Ibn Umar, who was known as a mighty scholar. It wasn't given to Ibn Abbas, who was known as a, like you can have the chaplain, right? You have the chaplain, and then you have the president, and then you have your hand, right? Am I saying your name right? Okay. So, like here, we decide that the copy goes to you. Like, gender wasn't an issue for them. That's what I'm trying to understand. Gender has become an issue now. Whether that's due to, number one, the issues within the Muslim community. We have many issues within our community, whether it's the effects of colonization, which we cannot ignore. But I don't like to blame. You know what we do? It's so easy to scapegoat other people. Because when you scapegoat other people, you don't look at your own problems. We have enough of our own problems, but we can also acknowledge other factors. But it was very common. Secondly, the muhaddithat, they redefined scholarship because it's not a patriarchal scholarly framework. People need to understand that. When you have the Quran, it's being collected, when you have the hadith, like you have hadith, people say to you, 5 before 5. The best of you are those who are best to your wife or your wives. You know, that, it didn't come from a patriarchal scholarly framework. It came off the backs of men and women who were utterly dedicated to preserving this faith. I was just in Birmingham New Street and I went to the multi-faith prayer room and it's full and you have Muslims going in and out and in and out, and I'm sitting there and I'm like in awe, and I'm like, you have young people who are 16 and you have elderly people who are like 60. They're coming because their faith is absolutely important to them. And that's why one of the reasons why many people have an issue with Islam is because we have norms. You know, I decide to wear the headscarf. I decide to wear the abaya. That is my personal choice. I will not stop wearing the headscarf or the abaya because I live in the UK. There's no, like, it's not fading, and that's why people assume that when you come to the UK you have to assimilate. That for you to be a good British citizen, you have to be like, you have to, you know, fit in. Whereas we believe that you can integrate, and you have to absolutely integrate. You have to be part of the institutions, you have to, you know, be on the boards of the schools, you have to go in and you have to be the dinner ladies, you have to be the doctors, but that doesn't mean you have to compromise your faith. Why is it that everybody deserves their freedom of expression except Muslims? Like, everybody has an issue with what I'm wearing, everybody has an issue with the beard, everybody has an issue that maybe a brother does not want to shake the hand. Everybody has an issue that somebody may do this. We are so big on everybody having, you know, their own form of sexuality, but a dress is problematic for people. So there's a lot of hypocrisy there, and it's important to call that out. Everybody has the right to believe in what they believe. And just like I remember, I went to Nottingham University and I had a group of Caucasian males, and they're all in front of me and they're like, "You've internalized your misogyny." I'm like, you as a man are telling me I've internalized my misogyny? I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, shut up, right? I'm like, I can't be happy. And then I had another, she went Muslim and she got up and she was like, "Please, like, guys, you need to stop." And like I said to him, like, if you went to Saudi, would you be able to do what you're doing? And I'm like, absolutely. Depending on where you're going. I'm like, even in the UK, depending where I go, I'd either be allowed or I'd not be allowed, right? So don't use your biases to try and put me down, because I know enough about my religion to not be broken. You know, so, number 3, I mentioned Aisha, she played a major role in the formation of Islam, and she set a precedent that Islam, you know, the religion, the faith, it was open to them all. And finally, scholars respected scholarship. Gender didn't play a role. Like, biology didn't have a factor. Now, here's the thing, this is where people get confused about. What Islam does is, it says focus on your priorities. Focus on your priorities. It gives objective guidelines for those priorities, but there are always subjective scenarios that those objective rules don't apply. Do you appreciate where I'm coming from? So what Islam does is that it says, it gives the men, not in most cases, it says that it gives them the qiwama. They have a leadership responsibility, more so a financial responsibility, because there'll be a time where, in some cases, a woman may have children and she is unable to work, and that gives her ease. Do you understand? It's not that it gives the man control, it gives the woman ease. And it makes it easy for her, and I know what that feels like. I remember I used to be on Facebook and all these Muslim women used to write posts about motherhood, and I'm like, I find them so condescending and patronizing. And then I had children. And then I was in my 2nd trimester of pregnancy, and I'm like, I can't even get up for work. And I said to my husband, I can't get up for work. He's like, no, you're fine, get up. And like, don't tell me I'm fine. You cannot empathize with what I'm going through right now. You know, so Islam gives priorities, it gives roles, but those roles are to empower men and women. The first and foremost role that Islam does is that you're a believer, that you're a human being actually. You're a human being, and then you're a believer, and then you being a mother, or you being a father, or you being a doctor, you being an engineer, you being a prime minister, that doesn't make you great. Because we have men who are mentioned in the Qur'an that had great roles, but they did evil things. Like, what makes you great is that whenever you take up a role, you do it well. So I'm focusing a lot on the spiritual aspect, because I find this a lot more effective than going back and forth with evidences. So, going back, okay. So, who here has heard of Dr. Akram An-Nadwi? Okay, so Dr. Akram An-Nadwi, he put together a 57 volume of female scholars. And within that book, and it was absolutely, and it is absolutely groundbreaking, because he brings up examples of women, and he brings up male scholars, and he tells you how many teachers they've had. But one thing I want you to understand is that many of these women, like people will say, like, why don't we know more about these women? many of these women weren't concerned about leadership positions. They just wanted to make an impact. Do you understand? So you have Fatima al-Fihriya, and Fatima al-Fihriya, she established Masjid al-Qaraween. You know, it's a huge masjid in Fez in Morocco, and she did that. But then you had women who were exceptionally knowledgeable, and they were more focused, they were busy, they were like homemakers. And I'm married and I have kids, and you know, I'm going to go home on Monday, it's all toddler groups, fitting in studying, fitting in babies, and going back and doing school runs. I'm meeting so many university grad women who at this time, they may be prioritizing their children. Many of them have gone back to work, their children are in childcare, but they don't have time to go out and do something. Do you understand? They are concerned in, I'm making a difference in what is in my control right now. And that's why you have many of the female scholars, and that's why I want to mention these names, because they're important to me, is that you had Al-Bukhari ibn Abu Walid, they studied with 70 women. It was just common. You had Muslim Abu Ibrahim, he studied with 70 women in Basra. Very normal, very common. You had Imam al-Dahabi, Said ibn Najjar, he wrote a book, and he said that among 1,000, he had 1,000 teachers, 400 of them were women. It was normal, they were going back and forth. He said Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, which is the big one, he said he studied more than 70 books with Ma'aisha al-Naqdisiyya. It was very common. They're studying with female scholars, they're part of their lives. So it completely breaks the stereotype that, you know, men and women, they were part of a society, that all this oppression that takes place, it usually takes place because people don't have knowledge. And I want you to understand the demographics. A lot of people, let's say, for example, from Pakistan, from India, when they came over to the UK, many of them may have went to work in the factories. Do you understand? Because they just wanted to survive. They got the corner shops. And then their children, a few of them went to university, but many of them did not. It's your generation that's going to university. It's not their generation. They're just surviving. So now you have, and this is what Dr. Akram al-Nadwi says, that people in Pakistan, you're from Karachi, right? They have an amazing culture. You go to Kashmir, it's amazing. You had that food ranger who recently went to Pakistan. And he made those food videos, and he's like, his facial expressions are something else. But he's loving the food. But he said the problem is that many times the Muslim community, when they came here, they had a tendency to stick together and hold on to their culture. And that's what kept them safe. That's why you have places like in Birmingham, in Alima, they have a tendency to stick together, not because they don't want to integrate, it's because they felt safe. And that's why where I live in Walsall, you have pockets, like my father always told us, don't go to Beachdale, or don't go to these places, because it's like, it's an all-white area, and it's like, I've been a few times and I've been attacked. So when I came to that realization, I learned that it's not, you're not attacking because you're white or you're Asian, you're attacking because you're ignorant. You're attacking because you're not mixing, you're attacking because you don't have an appreciation of this faith. And now when you're going on Facebook and you're reading about Shamima, and then you're on the bus and you see a woman that looks like Shamima, you're like, they're all the same. You know, what if you got up and started having a conversation with that Muslim woman and said to her, listen, I've heard this on the news. And that's why whenever I go out, and my husband's like, you're really bad. You'll talk to a brick wall if you can. And I'm like, I'll just see people, I'm like, hey, how are you doing? And I had this great conversation with like this girl and guy on the train. Like, you do that. Why? Because I'm like, I have the opportunity to change their perspective. So number 2 is, okay. So I want to mention a few of these names. Are you happy for me to go through the names? I just don't want to miss these names. So you have Darda, she's a prominent jurist, meaning she's a faqih, she's giving rulings, she's taking rulings, the men and women are coming to her, and her students included Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who was the Khalifa, who was the highest religious and political authority. He would come to Darda and she would go to his house and she would teach them and she would teach their children. It was common. You had Amr bin Abdurrahman, and the story of Amr bin Abdurrahman is quite interesting because Amr bin Abdurrahman, she was once again a jurist, and in the time of Medina, there was a case. We know that in Muslim countries, there's at times there can be capital punishment. So, and by the way, that's the case in Singapore. That's the case in it was the case in America. It happens in many countries. So in that time, so a man was found stealing. So here a male judge passed a ruling that he goes through the capital punishment. Amra bint Abdurrahman, she heard about this case, she got up, she's like, no, like, that's not the case. Like, you can't put someone through a punishment on their first offense. This is someone who has stolen, several times, and this is someone who's stolen above the head, and you take the personal situation into consideration. The capital punishment is not to punish people, and it's not something that can be applied here, but it's not to punish people, it's a deterrent. It's there to deter people, and she stepped in. And they say that that person was actually, he weren't Muslim. But at that time, and we found in Palestine and places, the Muslims and non-Muslims lived together. So Muslims committed crimes, non-Muslims committed crimes. And she stepped in, and he was saved from that because she was knowledgeable in that field. And that's why they say that even non-Muslims in Islamic societies, they reached high positions, that they were accountants, they were political activists. It was very normal for them to be that. It's not like you're not a Muslim, so we can't take from you. So Islamic societies were very different to how the Khalifa is painted right now, because you have the conception of ISIS, right? Completely dehumanizes any, so that even though when Khalifa has become like a hot word, that weren't the case. That's a radical, extreme group that is taking advantage of young women, and that's why Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah, he said that religion can take a good person and make them great, but a bad person, they will use religion to further their hatred, and they will use it and abuse it. And that's what we have. We have good people, they come into faith and they're great. Then you have bad people who have evil characteristics, and they take the religion and they do awful things. And you need to look at Islam, like you go to Mexico, you go to Peru, you go to the drug cartels, and you go to stuff, you go to rape cases in India, and they're not Muslims who are doing this. So the problem is that whenever we have a case that happens to be Muslim, we capitalize on it. But now if we bring in drug cartels, and we bring in the grooming gangs, let's just say, in Huddersfield, your perception of both are so different. And I was recently reading the news on Essex, and there were like all the pedophiles, and out of all of the pedophiles, there were only 2 Asian ones. Because your color doesn't define whether you're a pedophile or not. It's who you are and what you decide to do. So, you have Amra bint Abdurrahman, you have Fatima bint Abdurrahman, she was known as Sophia, this is in the 4th century. She was celebrated for her, her connection. She was a spiritual woman. When you think of Buddhism, you think of spirituality. When you think of Islam, what do you think about? Because it's been coined in such a way. So these women were spiritual, they were praying, they were in reflection, and they say that she was the granddaughter of Abu Dawood, and she was a scholar. She was known to teach. And you have Salam, she was the daughter of the judge Abu Bakr Ahmed, meaning that some of the most conservative men were raising some of the most empowered women, because we have this perception, the more religious you are, the more harsh you are, the more unfriendly you are. These people are some of the most religious, but they're the kindest. That's why they say that the Prophet, peace be upon him, he was Haluk al-Azim. He's like the best in character. There's a prophetic narration that they say that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was sent as a beacon of good character. He came to help people. He came to be kind to people. And that's why whenever you see the Prophet, peace be upon him, he's kind to young, he's kind to elderly, he's kind to animals, he's kind to plants, he's taking that into consideration. You have Shifa bint Abdullah. She's always, people mention Shifa because she was the first woman who was given the position in the marketplace. So you have, do you have Meadowhall? You don't have Meadowhall, right? What do you have? Westfield. Nearby, far away, I'm guessing. Yeah, Westfield, like something as big as Westfield. Umar, he elected a shifa that you're the manager. And they say she would go around and she was really, like that really strict manager that you just don't mess around with. It was normal. And if people understand who Umar ibn Khattab was, they'll understand that even as someone who's so strong in terms of religiosity, he has no problem electing a female. And then you have just a few more. Jum'ah, she held classes regularly, and she had huge audiences, like in the thousands of men and women. They were dedicated to learning from her. You have Fatima bint al-Hasan. She's a hadith scholar in the 5th and 6th century, and she was a master of calligraphy. That was her talent. She was known for that. She was celebrated for that. You have Karima. She is considered the best authority of Sahih al-Bukhari, even above the male scholars. Like, she's celebrated for that. You have Fatima bin Muhammad. She's a writer. She would lecture about Sahih al-Bukhari, and they were attended by men and women. You have Sitt al-Wusra. She's once again an authority in Sahih al-Bukhari, and she delivered lectures in public places in Damascus. Once again, very common. You have Aisha bin Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. She was a jurist. She was a scholar. She was a renowned jurist. And I want you to say that if these women were in our times, they'd be like Rebecca, they'd be like Helen and stuff. Sometimes I mention these names and they're like, people like can't connect with them. They're like, Fatima, like this Arab religion or this Pakistani or this South Asian religion. No, like if these women were in our time, they'd have our names. Like my friend Tabitha, she's English. She became Muslim when she was 16. Like, and where I'm in Sheffield, a majority of my friends are actually reverts, strangely enough. And they all, weirdly enough, converted when they were really, when they're like 16, 17, and they didn't convert because they were with a Muslim guy or something. It's because they were doing their research, and they all kept their non-Muslim names. And it's important to take that away, that you view Islam as a universal religion. And I remember one of my previous employer, he would tell me that in Bosnia, Bosnia was the pure white race of Muslims. Like they were like Caucasian. And unfortunately, after what happened in Bosnia, it's a dying race. Do you know why it's a dying race? Because many of the women were raped. And now, because of that trauma, they are fearful of getting involved in relationships. And that's why I say that women sometimes can be the most vulnerable. When you look at sex trafficking, or human trafficking, who are usually trafficked? It's women, right? When you look at domestic violence rates, who are the main victims? It's women. You know, when you look at acid attacks, who are the main victims? It's like women. So you are constantly seeing this, and even in war. And people need to understand that. Let me explain how, just bringing in feminism really briefly, is that people always discuss about feminism, but people need to understand how was feminism introduced in the Muslim world in Egypt. Has anybody heard of Qasim al-Amin? And I think I mentioned this previously. Qasim Amin, they say Qasim Amin, he's like the father of feminism in the Muslim world. They say Lord Cromer, whilst in the UK they were fighting the suffragettes, because we know the UK had a problem with the very first feminists. At the same time, what they were trying to do is that in Egypt, they were trying to introduce feminism in the Muslim world. And that's why you had Qasim Amin and Lord Cromer. They say that they didn't focus on maternal health, and they didn't focus on segregation. They focused on two things. What were they? On hijab and segregation. They focus on hijab and segregation, and they say when you look at Qasim Amin and you look at his family, you'll see that his family were some of the most uneducated of women. That they were not concerned about the welfare of women, and they say what happened was that when they tried to introduce it, that they had a huge backlash. Who did the backlash come from? Who do you think? Was it the Islamists? Or was it the nationalists? It was the nationalists. It was the nationalists who had a problem, and this is why we say that whenever you have an agenda, it's never successful. So when you come in and you attack ideals that are not that strong in the Muslim community, the women are going out, they're wearing the headscarf, some women decide to wear the niqab, but they're going to the marketplace, they're educating, they're at university, they're lecturing. So now the attack comes, what the society does, and when war happens, the women are generally the first to be protected. You know, the women are the first to be brought in, and this is exactly what happened. And what happened is segregation and hijab became a symbol of resistance. And that's why, unfortunately, we've come to a stage now where the hijab and, the hijab and, let's just say, if we speak about it from that sense, segregation, they act, but they don't have substance in our communities because we're always on survival mode. Whereas what the Prophet, peace be upon him, and what the Qur'an did was they wanted it to have substance, that when you believe fully. When you question and you critique and you find that conviction, you're not Muslim. And this is for those, you're not Muslim because your parents were Muslim, because that's not belief. You have to do your research, you have to, if you're struggling, and me teaching here, the only reason why I'm teaching is because I've critiqued and I found a lot of problematic issues, and I thought to myself, I'm not just going to believe what people are teaching me. And I went and I did my research, and I came to the realization that this is something that needs to be spoken about. So I'm going to, what time is it?
7 o'clock.
Okay, so I'm going to end there because I need to leave soon, but should we do the Q&A? So one thing we'll do is we'll go down. Are you guys okay with the Q&A? Okay, because Q&A is usually the fun part, right? Everybody's going to forget what I've said, a majority of it, except for a few. But the Q&A, people have a tendency to remember. And so if you do have any questions, then feel free to ask. Yes.
So can you reiterate about the conception of الرجال قوامون على النساء?
Okay, so the concept of that men are the protectors and maintainers of women. Okay, so here, so number one, qawwama, meaning this added responsibility for men, it's not a privilege, it's a responsibility. That's the premise. Because if you seek it as a privilege, then you may take it as an element, I'm superior. There's no superiority in Islam between men and women. So you have a responsibility. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, what we learned from our scholars was that there's a circle. Within that circle, God has given the man added responsibility. That is a leadership figure in the house. Because whenever any social circle, there's an element of leadership there. That's a responsibility upon you, and the financial responsibility. You have that circle, so now, out of that circle, there are elements that you do not have the right to control, because Allah says in the Qur'an, in Surah An-Naba, they don't become of the oppressors. And the story that they narrate, part of that is the story of Barira and Mughith. Anybody heard that story? That you had a man and you had a woman. Barira female, Mughith was the male. That they were together, and then Barira asked for the khula, meaning she asked for the separation. That's her right. They say that Mughith loved her very much. He loved her so much, and he would go around to everyone and he'd say, tell Barira, and this is in Sahih al-Bukhari, and he said, tell Barira, I love her and not to leave me. Eventually he went to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he said, I love her, can you just step in on my behalf? The Prophet, peace be upon him, he went to Barira and he said, you know what, why don't you give him a chance? Now people come, they're like, why don't you give him a chance? Barira turned around to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and said, is this from you? Is this your personal advice? Or is this from Allah? The Prophet, peace be upon him, says, no, this is my opinion. It's not a commandment from God. Barira said, if this is from you, then I still want to go ahead with the khula. And they were both separated. So even the Prophet, peace be upon him, understood he had boundaries. So as the qawwama, you have that leadership responsibility. At times the final decision does go to you. But there is a shura, the concept of shura, the concept of consultation, that comes before the qawwama. You know, a marriage is mawadda and rahma. It's not about control. It's not about the woman controlling the man or the man controlling the woman. It's about two parties coming together for what is better. So as the qiwam, you go in, you're that protector, and little elements within the marriage, they're none of your business. What she studies, what she wears, who she sees, if she visits her parents. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because I know not only Muslim men, but non-Muslim men in general, at times try and control the woman too much, and that causes harm within the marriage. So Qawwama, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you an added responsibility for the caretaking and maintaining of the family. That's the physical and the financial needs of her. And for the woman, it's also to respect that Qawwama. So if, let's just say you do shura, you come to a decision, and let's just say the husband has made that decision, the wife and the husband who respect that. Because when you don't respect it, that's when problems arise. But shura is a huge, I'm talking about from a realistic perspective as well, being a wife. I teach on the topic of marriage, and one thing we find is that many men misunderstand the woman, so they go in within marriage with all, like, you know, I can control this marriage, and the wife goes also with the, you know, I'm not going to be controlled, then you hit head. Marriage is about sacrifice, it's about compromise, it's about love, it's about understanding, it's about empathy. When you understand that, you'll be able to move forward and grow. It's not about my way or the highway, and Allah knows best. Does that help?
Yeah, but also, I get asked a lot about some verses in the Quran where males have not the authority, but I don't know agreement of, let's say, providing a form of punishment.
Sorry?
Punishing women.
Chapter 4, verse 34.
You're talking about domestic violence?
Not domestic
violence.
Okay, so which one are you referring to?
Yeah, I think, I don't know which.
I'm referring to the verse on wife beating.
Okay, yeah.
Verse 34.
So the thing is, I did research on this. So number one, so in Islam there are 4 sources. There's Qur'an, there's Hadith, there's Sunnah, there's Qiyas. Hadith and Sunnah together, but 2 different things. Qiyas and there's ijma. Ijma is the consensus. First of all, you cannot take a verse of the Qur'an without understanding the Sunnah. I cannot go to the Citadel and take a verse on their, you know, manual of how they run the country and war and use that to say America are a bunch of terrorists. You can't do that. The Quran has context. So now with that verse, you have to take the cultural context into consideration, and number 2, you have to take the ijma. So the ijma of the scholars was never that meant wife beating. Ijma is the consensus, it's authority. So it's not, there's no such, you can't beat a wife. That's the ijma of the Sahaba. Secondly, culturally, there's different responses to that. Some of the people say is that culturally, daraba, it never meant to hit. Daraba never meant to hit. They say that, you know, people say the siwak, what Sheikh Abdul Nasir Jangda, he said to, when we learned it off him, he said, just trying to remember what he said now. He mentioned something. It's gone from my mind. But let me mention here, that's going to come back to me. So, the daraba is important, number 1. Secondly, is the focus is not on admonishing women, but protecting the marriage. So, the woman has a right to khula. That is, if problems arise in the marriage, then the husband, then this is something where, you know, like culturally, I know if my husband gives me the look, I'm like, okay, we need to like be quiet right now. And say with my husband, I'm like he said something a few days ago, and I just looked at him, and he's like, okay, that's it. Can't say no more. This is the reality of marriage. Marriage is really like you're debating with each other who gets in bed last and who shuts the light. Whoever's last, they have to shut the light. Marriage is little things. So here, if I remember Sheikh Abdul Nasir Jangda, daraba refers to that it meant that for the Arabs, it meant the tap. That For my husband, it's the look. I know if he looks at me, he means like, Alima, you're going too far, you're complaining too much, like you just need to calm down. And I know if I go a bit step up, he's just going to get a bit upset. Like my husband wouldn't, like men, good men don't do that. Secondly, so in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was a tap. Now if the husband came and he's like, she's like really getting agitated, and the husband would come, he'd tap her, and that was enough for her to know, you've gone too far, just calm down. Secondly, what's important is classical Muslim scholars, they maintain that if a man beat a woman, that he was punishable and he was liable for jail. That was the classical Muslim scholars. They had that. So now you're telling me, if that means that you can beat a woman, why would the classical scholars ever come up and say that if a man beat her, that he'd be put in prison? What I'm saying is you're taking it out of context to meet your needs. Not your needs, but in particular about Islam. And you can't do that. One thing also I just want to say, okay, so you know in the Qur'an, there are certain verses that are aimed at women, there are certain verses that are aimed at men, there are verses that are aimed at men and women. So with Maryam, Allah He uses qanitina. Qanitina applies. Maryam is an example for all people. The audience, what our teachers mentioned to us, that the audience here was primarily men. It was aimed at them. So it was a reminder for the men that this is an evidence that there is no such thing as domestic violence, because it's a culturally accepted practice. We have to look at the Arabs. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he never was physically violent with anyone, let alone his wives. There were examples of 1 or 2 companions who came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and their wives complained, and the Prophet ﷺ strongly stood up against that. It was unacceptable, but please go ahead. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I mean,
No, we'll give him time. Take your time.
Yeah, so
do you feel more comfortable writing it down? Do what's easy for you. So we'll wait. But we're going to come back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And so...
Yeah, I've got a slightly different subject, so I'm not trying to follow on from that one, okay.
No problem.
First of all, my apologies for coming in late.
Oh no!
You know, I certainly believe when you say that you're on top of a brick wall, you're very eloquent, and you're also very intelligent, obviously. And there are a number of Sahih hadiths in which Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, speaks of women as being deficient in common sense or deficient in intelligence, and the evidence of that is that the witness of 2 women is equal to 1 man, or the witness of 1 man is equal to 2 women, etc. You know, suggesting that women's brains are deficient in some way. Doesn't that bother you as an intelligent woman?
So, remember I said to you, I went back and I did my research. Number 1, did it bother me? Absolutely. It absolutely bothered me, and I thought to myself, so I'm Muslim because my parents were Muslim, so let me go back and do my research. Because it's unfair for me on myself, because nothing else is problematic, just these 2. So number 1 is that hadith. So the way this one will come back up. So, okay. So a reading, you don't know Arabic, I'm guessing.
I do not speak Arabic or read Arabic.
Okay, so I sat down. So before
I've only read translations of things.
Okay, and that's one thing. So even with everyone, one you need to understand, like there are hadith and there are problematic hadith. We call them sledgehammer hadith sometimes because people without the correct understanding, they use them as a sledgehammer against women. That's problematic. So number 1 is that when I want to say, I don't want to miss anything out because I always miss stuff out and then I regret it later. So number 1 is hadith cannot be taken literally. Can't be taken literally. So because it can't be.
They can't be taken literally.
So look at the context. Okay, so the context is the Prophet, peace be upon him, he's with it's the day of Eid, okay? So it's the day of Eid, the Prophet ﷺ, the peace be upon him, he's there, he's talking to the women of the Ansar. We know that the women of Mecca and the women of the Ansar are completely different personalities. The women of Mecca are women whose husbands usually travelled outside for trade, they generally stayed at home. So they were a bit more closed, whereas the women of the Ansar, women of Medina, they worked with the men in the fields. So they were generally a lot more open, the men and women, they were mixing. They said the Arabs, they would actually eat together. And that's why they say a woman came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, she said, you know, can I just sit and eat with my ex-husband? Just as people are there, the Prophet, peace be upon him, says, yeah, that's fine, as long as you fulfill certain guidelines. So now you have the women of the Ansar, they're very, they're very strong-minded women. And now the Prophet, peace be upon him, he's joking around with them. This is why we need to bring the human. He's not saying they're deficient. He's saying that, you know, when you get really angry with your husbands, and that's why some of the men of Mecca, they complained about the women of Medina. He says that they're too overpowering. That was their complaint. Even if I'm being frank, when it came to like sexual practice, even that was so different because you had the women of the Ansar, they were really, they were like loud, they were dynamic, they were boisterous. The women of Mecca, they were quite quiet. Because culture plays a role on who you are. You'll see your moms from Pakistan, they're like a bit more timid, and you'll see you guys and you're like, you know. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, is turning around to the women of the Ansar and he's speaking about them and he's trying to encourage them to give charity. And he's trying to say to them that, you know, when you're discussing with your husband and when you have an argument, then you just can't think straight. It's not that they don't have an intellect. The Prophet said that when you get so angry that you're not thinking clearly.
So how does that link to the witness?
Okay, so
the witness of two real witness of two being one man in that case. Because that's not about giving money to charity.
You're right.
It's about
absolutely. So I've looked into,
you know, the ability of a woman to think straight.
No, absolutely. And here's the thing: what you've done is, so I'm going to mention the verse in the Qur'an. So it says, and bring two witnesses from among your men, and if there are not two men available, then a man and two women from those who you accept as witnesses. So the question, what we say, is that there's two things. This verse was specifically on the topic of women and money matters. Women and money matters. So one.
You can't hear the question. What was the question?
Oh, sorry. The question is about two witnesses.
Yeah.
So one was saying, so the Prophet, peace be upon him, the first hadith, it's a very human hadith about women. The Prophet ﷺ, you can't take that hadith universally because it goes against the evidence of the Prophet, peace be upon him, nurturing Aisha, who is more intelligent than many of the men. So women can't be deficient. So now the hadith of the witnesses, what we says is that hadith was, so scholars have differed on this. So some of the scholars said that topic was about women and it was generally about money matters. So even now, when it comes to finances, a majority of men go into accounting. Women do, but not as much. So now the scholars have said when it comes to a specific where men may be more engaged in that, so for example, Pakistan. So some women may be staying at home and women may be more engaged in, men may be engaged in more money matters, then the woman comes in to help her. It's not to degrade her, it's to help her. I always say that when you read a hadith, you have to read it from the correct lens. So it's to help her. Now, any other matter that's not money matters, there was a huge difference of opinion that if a woman came and she was just as qualified as a man, that one witness would be enough. Also, if a man was not qualified, that it was okay to bring in two witnesses of men and one of a woman. So it was based on qualification, not on women being deficient. Because you have Bilqis in the Qur'an, who's a leader, who's a queen, and she's a leader.
But she's a queen, she's from the Bible, okay,
yeah.
not from the Quran.
But the Quran is
simply retelling many stories of women in the Bible.
Absolutely. So if the Quran is claiming that it's a true religion, and it can't just start from the Prophet, peace be upon him, can it? It's narrating history. So it's not necessarily it's taking stuff, it's affirming many stories in the Bible, because there are stories in the Bible that are true. So that's what it is, and it's a fair, and that's why for Prophet Jesus, he has a huge value for Muslims. like the amount of love and gratitude we have for him. Like we have a surah in the Qur'an that's Maryam alayhi salam. Like for us, like she's recited in salah every day. And so going back is, I just don't want to miss anything from here. So there's a story in the time of Imam Shafi'i, the mother of Imam Shafi'i, big scholar. His mother was called to witness, and the judge said to her that, you know, your witness on its own is fine. She actually said to the judge that, you know what, I'd rather bring a woman because there's a few things I've forgotten, so you had two witnesses. But she brought it in, so she had the chance of one, and she brought in another woman because it helped her out. So this is the important part. Whenever you read a hadith or Qur'an, it's important to learn the sunnah. You may have a hadith that's the statements, but then you have the sunnah that's actually the actions. So now the Prophet, peace be upon him, he may have said that it's better for women to pray at home. That's a hadith. But then his sunnah of all the women was that they went to the masjid. The reason why he said that hadith, there are many reasons. It's because you'll have women like me who are mothers who can't go to pray 5 times a day. And if that hadith weren't present, I would have felt like I'm missing out. But now I'm saying is that if I can pray at home, then I'm still getting the same reward, and I find it very empowering. So it depends on what lens you're willing to look at it. So a witness is someone, so it's important to identify what is a witness. A witness is someone who has seen the case. A witness is someone who has understood the case. Seen and understood. You can't just bring men and women forward for the sake of them being men. They have to have seen it, they have to have understood it. So a woman is not chosen, or no, a witness is not chosen or identified based on gender. It's based on qualification, and it's based on direct contact. This is where the judges came in. So the case has to fulfill the above 2 conditions. So justice should be the case, should be that if the case can be understood for men, then men should be preferred, and if the case can be better understood by men, men should be preferred. If the case is better understood by women, then women would be preferred. So if you take that verse out of context, absolutely, I'm with you there. But now if you apply the context, and that's what Islam does, and that's why you have hadiths that are recorded, and you have scholars that debated over this. Then
please take someone else's question, because you spend too much time on me.
Oh no, my pleasure. Absolutely.
Do
you want to? Okay, thank you. I do not read Okay, so
why did Muhammad change his mind when women complained from the hadith?
Do you mind if I go back and read the Arabic of that?
I don't think the Arabic is on the phone.
No, that's fine. I'll find that hadith. Okay. Because the thing is, I can't give you a proper understanding of that hadith if I don't read the Arabic, and if I don't understand the context, because I'm just taking somewhere out of that, and I'd be giving you my opinion, and my opinion on that basis has no value. If you could give your email, so it's a hadith, it appears quite problematic. I need to do some research on it. I need to read the Arabic. I need to understand what the Prophet peace be upon him was implying, what he was saying. I need to understand if it's fabricated, if it's actually authentic. One thing you have to remember, that just because a hadith is in a book, that doesn't necessarily make it authentic. It can still be quite problematic. But thanks for bringing that to my attention. Does anybody have?
Would you agree if I say it is encouraged in Muslim for women to wear scarves and clothes that imply being humble and stuff like that?
So, okay, so when the verses of hijab were revealed, the women around the Prophet, peace be upon him, they went out and they found anything and they covered themselves. So from an Islamic basis, there is an obligation to wear the headscarf and to dress modestly. There is an obligation. However, and so obligation is there. That's absolutely present. So I'll come back. But yeah, the obligation is there.
Okay, so for both men and women.
Absolutely. So for example,
I just don't see how this is encouraged for men too, because you see right and left, there's clearly a difference between how people, what they're wearing right now.
Yeah, like, the thing is, now I as a woman, it doesn't bother me that the men are not wearing a headscarf. So because you're applying equality versus equity. So now,
not the scarf specifically, but I just feel like...
So in Islam, men are encouraged to have the beard. That's a very strong sunnah. Some of the scholars have said it's wajib, meaning it's almost obligatory. Men are supposed to, from here to here, wear loose clothing. So you know, like when men wear skinny tight jeans, that Islamically they say like no, like you have to wear loose. You're just like the shape of my body can't be showing, your body can't be showing too. So there are elements there. The other thing you need to understand is that the point, the illah behind hijab was not modesty per se. You know, it was about identification. It was about, I am recognized as a Muslim woman. You know, this is my identity, this gives me strength. It's like, for example, I can go out there and I can be abused by a male sexually despite me wearing the hijab. Me wearing the hijab hasn't necessarily stopped him. And I know Muslim women who have been abused. So the illah is not modesty, because if it was modesty, you'll have two women walking in. I hope, guys, you don't mind finding me. You have two women, we have one woman who's wearing the headscarf and she's wearing a lot of makeup, she's wearing maybe skinny tight jeans and stuff. You'll have another woman, she's not Muslim, and she's wearing loose clothing, no hijab, no makeup. Who would you define as more modest? Who would you define as more modest? Like you'd say the one who's not Muslim, right? Because she's dressing more modestly. What I'm saying is that illah is not modesty, but it has connotations of modesty. That, you know, women are encouraged to just be more, try and appear more modest, try and appear more humble. But what's even more important than the hijab, even though it's obligatory, is what's going on the inside and how you're treating people. If you're praying salah, if you're doing dua, if you're doing dhikr, and you're abusing and you're swearing and you're cursing, then you really need to question what's your faith. So the hijab is obligatory, but there are other factors that hold so much value to.
I just feel like women from a young age are encouraged to wear clothes that imply modesty, but I don't think the same is applied to men. Like there's not as much pressure.
That's a problem with parenting. Let me tell you a hadith. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he was going out to Mecca for Hajj. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, is traveling with Fadl and is traveling with Ibn Abbas. Fadl and Ibn Abbas are brothers. The Prophet, peace be upon him, they're walking out and a woman asks them a question. She's a young, attractive woman, and Fadl is in the back. And suddenly, the Prophet, peace be upon him, is looking at her and she's asking a question. No face covering, she's dressing modestly. And they say that Fadl just couldn't stop staring at her. He just couldn't stop staring at her. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he turned around to Fadl and he turned his face away. He never said nothing to the woman. Nothing. And he then, Fadl kept looking at her. He just, you know, young man, finds her attractive, let me just look. They say the Prophet, peace be upon him, he turned his face away 3 times. And he eventually got the message because the Prophet, peace be upon him, had a personal relationship with him. So now imagine if he said to the woman, and he wouldn't have said, imagine if he said to the woman, what are you doing here? Which he wouldn't have said anyway. He has no personal connection, she may have got offended. The Prophet, peace be upon him, nurtured the man because the man has that responsibility to lower the gaze. He has that responsibility to be respectable. He has the responsibility to be kind, to be generous within the homes. I have 2 boys. I have the responsibility that I have to raise my boys to be great men to women. Parents play a huge role in ensuring that the son and daughter are treated equally. If my daughter's not allowed out after 5, neither is my son. You know what I mean? The problem is we have many parents who parented differently. That's why when you look at the Muslim and the non-Muslim community, you have men who are on drugs. And yes, there are some women who are on drugs, but nothing compared to the percentage of men because of that mismatch of parenting. But I agree with you, men and women, when it comes to that, the emphasis, like if we emphasized, men lowering the gaze, men respecting women from a young age, we wouldn't be dealing with some of the abuse cases in the faith and non-faith community. And the lines. Question? No, you think? Do we have any more? Because I am going to, my training's at 8:10, so I've got about 15 minutes.
With that in mind, Q&A will be over, and we want to say a few words.
So no more questions? So I'm going to come back with that.
Send your details to us and we will...
Just come down after and I'll take your email. So one thing I just want to quickly mention about du'as of the superstars, so I'll translate for you guys, like who's here into personal development? Okay, so I give a lot of lectures to young women. My aim is to, and that's where the Muslimas Renaissance, our aim is to nurture, women who are living up to their potential that Allah has given them. We want you to, like, if you go out, if you want to be a doctor, you be a doctor. If you want to be an engineer, you go out and be an engineer. But we also want to nurture that strong spiritual connection that helps you feel happy and content. So, du'as of the superstars, du'as means prayers. There's a huge focus on men and women from the past who made a difference, so you can find role models in them. We live in a very narcissistic community, unfortunately. So the aim was to re-navigate you guys to find contentment in your own achievement, rather than living in an era where we spend a lot of time watching other people's lives. So it's very, it's a good read. And the aim, we've included a lot of personal examples, there's a lot of stories in there, there's a lot of case studies. If you've heard my voice now, so it'll feel like I'm talking to you. So inshallah, so if anybody is interested, please do take a look, and we'll end there. So if I have said anything good, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, anything that I've made mistakes on, if I've appeared patronizing, condescending, if I may have missed something out, then I apologize for that. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك. I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the most perfect, and I seek forgiveness from you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm here for about 15 minutes. So if you just want to come down and have a chat, feel free to do
guys,
that.
you can see that you have a little piece of paper in front of you. Please feel free to write what you enjoyed from the speech and anything you would like to know more and how you could
and feedback, by the way, feedback for myself. I have like about 5,000 of these, a lot. I always go back and read them, we improve, and we also use them for my children. I always say when they grow up, and I want to say that when your mom spent a bit of time away from you, that she was not just relaxing or chilling out, she was doing something beneficial.
Please fill that out, and thank you for attending. Thank you.